it kind of gives you just an introduction to biology, what it is. So one of the things that's a takeaway is the definition of biology. It's just the study of life. And one of the things we need to know is what constitutes a living organism. Because I'm sure that y'all have gone over this before. My son is in the 6th grade right now, and that's one of the things, that's the unit that they're on right now. What are some of the things that you think of when you think of a living organism?
It moves.
It moves. Okay. What are other things that you think of when you think about something being alive? Anybody? Mostly just movement is kind of what you think of. So we actually, did someone have something? Okay, so it uses food and water, reproduction. Reproduction is definitely on the list. And movement is it's in the category of responding to environmental stimuli. Anybody else? Okay, so here is our list from your book. Different textbooks handle it differently, but this is how your book breaks it down. Order, so living things have some type of internal and external organization. Every living thing is made up of at least one cell. The ability to reproduce or reproduction, growth and development, energy processing, which would include all types of metabolism and all of the chemical reactions that take place inside the cell. Regulation, which is another way of saying the ability to maintain homeostasis. Response to the environment, which would encompass movement, and then evolutionary adaptation. So that is your list for what are the properties of living things. All living things have those properties. And we'll talk about each of them. So I talked about order a little bit. This is some type of organization. Let me go to this. This screencast is keeping me from being able to use the remote. Okay, so order, any type of organization, that's showing a hens and chicks plant or a sempervirens plant and how the leaves are organized. Reproduction, growth and development, organisms, even the more complex ones, start out as a single cell, and that cell divides, and as you get more cells, those cells differentiate to form specialized cells, which come together to form tissues and organs and organ systems. Energy processing. So how do we get energy as humans? Food. And so we eat the food, and then we break down the food, and our cells are able to get ATP or cellular energy from that, and then we break down the ATP or the cells break down the ATP when they need the energy. Regulation. So what is that lizard doing? Can y'all see that? At the bottom.
Is he warming himself in the sun?
Yeah, he's sunning himself to maintain, or to, keep his body temperature up. Let's see, response to the environment. This is showing a Venus flytrap catching a fly. Can anyone think of any other plants that do that basically eat insects?
Water spout.
A pitcher plant. There might be one called a water spout. Sundews. There's some other ones. Do you know why they do that? Does anyone know? Does anyone know what types of environments those kind of plants are usually found in?
Warm environments.
Not necessarily warm, but usually really rainy. And so in really rainy environments, there is a tendency for all of that rain that's passing through to wash the nitrogen, which is what's used to make protein, out of the environment. And so the plants there, instead of being able to take it up from the soil, have to have another way to get that nitrogen. And so some of them have adapted to be able to catch bugs and insects and break them down to the nitrogen. Okay, let's see. And then evolutionary adaptation is one that's not always on the list that you'll see, but your book has that as a major theme, and so that's on the list too. So you have questions about this? So I would like for you to have that as a takeaway, that the properties of life are order, reproduction, growth and development, response to the environment, energy processing, regulation, and evolutionary adaptation. What would be, so another one that would fall under regulation or maintaining homeostasis would be, like, how do humans how is our core temperature regulated? What are some ways that we regulate it? What if we go outside and it's really hot and we're doing a lot of exercise? What usually? We sweat, and that keeps our core temperature from being too high. What's something that we do if we're in the cold for a long period of time to try to keep what are some things that we do to try to keep our core temperature up or from getting too low? Shivering. And then also the blood to the most superficial parts of our bodies is limited, so because that's one way that we lose all the heat. And also, when it's hot outside, then that blood to the extremities is increased. So, okay, so we'll skip on through those. All right, so how do we recognize life? Or how do we tell if something is a living thing or not? Order, so it's going to have these, our list that we just made: order, the ability to reproduce, growth and development, response to the environment, processing, energy, regulation, and evolutionary adaptation. It has to have all of those things. Okay, so that covers that. Okay, so a group of biologists called taxonomists are scientists that are in the business of naming species and then also trying to categorize them or classify them into groups according to similarities and separate them according to differences. And so this has changed, and it probably will continue to change a little bit over time. When I was in high school, there were a different number of kingdoms from how many there are now. I think there were 5. Now there are 6 kingdoms. And then when I went to college, I think there were 5, and then I took 1 year off between college and grad school. When I came back to grad school, they had changed it again. So this is something that as we get new information and new technology to get new data, this information changes. It's not that the organisms are changing so much, and it's not that we're discovering a whole bunch of new organisms, it's that our understanding is changing as we get new information. Can y'all think of a particular type of information that we're able to look at now as we have more technology? It's been around for probably the last under 45 years, somewhere between 40 and 45 years. New information that's constantly being expanded. It was brand new in the late 70s, and no one was really using it until probably the 90s, which I know were y'all born in the 2000s? Yeah, so, but it's still being refined, as we go. Can y'all think of what that would be? Newer technology. The microscope is one thing, but we've had microscopes around since the 1600s. But they have been improved, and we have new types of microscopes. So that is one that did contribute to a lot more information in the field of microbiology and also just cell biology in general. But there's something newer than that it's still cutting edge, even though it's kind of been around for a little while. It's still cutting edge. What do they use in forensic labs? DNA. Yeah, so with the ability to look at DNA and RNA and also amino acids or protein sequences, that has given scientists the ability to look at how organisms are related to each other. So that is partly responsible for all of that restructuring. The technology came around and it was kind of slow. People scientists started finding new ways to use it, and now there's a lot of information, but we still don't have all of it. It's very expensive and time-consuming to do some of these analyses. Okay, so I'm going to go through the domains, and so there are 3 domains. This should all look very familiar, and how many of you have had a biology class like in the past 5 years? Maybe a third to half of you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's something that these 2 domains, bacteria and archaea, have in common that eukarya doesn't. Can anyone tell me what it is? What cell type do bacteria and archaea have?
Simple cells?
Well, they have simple cells, what also known as what? No. So they're prokaryotes, so they don't have true nuclei. We'll get into this in detail later, but they're prokaryotes, so they don't have true nuclei. They're a little bit more simple in their structure. And then the whole domain eukarya has eukaryotic cells, so they're eukaryotes. Okay, there we go. All right, so the domain is the very highest or most broad level of organization, and it goes down to kingdom will be next. And so in the domain bacteria, there's only one kingdom. Does anyone know what it's called? It's very conveniently named bacteria. And then with archaea, it's the same. It has kingdom archaea only. And we will get into details of this at a later time. Okay, and then the domain eukarya has all of the eukaryotic kingdoms. Eukaryotic cells have true nuclei, they have organelles or cell parts. They're bigger cells, and eukaryotes can be single or multi-celled organisms. And so those kingdoms are going to be Protista, which is kind of a catch-all and has all the weird ones that don't fit in the other 3, in the other 3 kingdoms. Fungi. That's a mess. Plantae and Animalia. What kingdom do humans fit into? Where do we fit in that? Animalia, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so this keeps doing something. And then it's Okay, so we already talked about this. We're in the domain eukarya in the kingdom Animalia. And so now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about emergent properties. Emergent properties is just a concept that means that as you go up in levels of organization, so like say from the cellular level up to the tissue, organ system, organism level, as you go up in that level of organization, there are properties that emerge or arise that are not present at the lower levels of organization. So like an organ such as the heart has a lot of properties and functions